Booth from brookeboothcoaching.com, where I help people who are in mixed faith marriages, right, in the LDS faith transition. And this is usually due to a faith transition by one partner or the other. I think he said LDS faith transition. I meant LDS faith tradition. Kind of funny. All right, so I'm going to talk tonight about some really great resources to help your kids, like teaching kids. There's so many people in mixed faith marriages. They want to teach their kids values, how to have good character, all of those things, but they're not entirely comfortable anymore using curriculum. So I have a few ideas. There's so many great resources out there, and I'm only going to share just a handful of ones that I have personally vetted, that I have personally found extremely valuable, but there are mountains more of resources out there. I want to say a few things before we get into the actual resources that I think are important to comment on. So many people come to a mixed faith marriage, like once they get in it because of a faith transition, they're like, wow, how do we do it with the kids? Like, how do we make sure the kids are going to be good people? How are we going to teach them? How is that going to happen? And there's so many concerns like, won't it be better if both parents are on the same page? Won't the church help keep them safe? How to handle it if one spouse wants the kids in and one spouse wants the kids out? How to teach values, how to be a good person without the structure and support of the church. All of these things, so many questions. And I'll talk more about those in upcoming video Facebook Lives. I'll do a whole series on them, I promise, because I know so many people have so many questions about this. But I wanted to start first with just some basic resources. And I want you to consider a few ideas first. It is totally possible to raise kids without a religious viewpoint, like to raise good kids. I should clarify it. Value-based, like honest, good kids without, the basis of religion. And it's totally possible to raise them with it, right? Both are 100% there. It's totally possible to shame and demean kids from a religious viewpoint and from a secular viewpoint. And I think that's really like what we're talking about when we talk about being good parents and teaching our kids. Are we doing, it doesn't really necessarily matter always what we're teaching them, but are we teaching them through guilt and shame? Or are we teaching them with love and empowerment? That's one thing to consider before you really get too carried away in all the resources and how to dig through that. Because you've probably known really good people who weren't raised LDS, and you know really good people who were, because it's not contingent on one or the other, right? Raising really good kids is not contingent on being LDS or not LDS. It's just not. Second, how your kids turn out, whatever that means, is not dependent on your parenting. I know this is really hard for us to understand as parents. It's really hard. You can do all of the quote unquote right things, and that doesn't mean your kids are going to turn out perfect, right? And I want to pause here. Let's even talk about, what does it even mean to turn out? Like, what are we even talking about when we want our kids to be okay and turn out and to be good people? It's kind of vague. Often it's just sort of a vague idea we have in our head that usually looks something along the lines of, they'll look sort of like me and they'll make choices sort of like the choices I made. And they'll do things at the same milestones that I did things. And honestly, those are kind of arbitrary standards, right? We just want them to make similar choices that we made. It's kind of interesting, and I think it can be helpful to pause and really ask what it is we want. What is it that we want for our kids? Like, what are our goals in parenting? Is it to create little mini me's, or is it to create something else? Something to think about. So with that said, if you choose to approach your parenting from a more secular perspective, and there are many, many reasons to do that, especially if you're in a mixed faith marriage or if you or your spouse have gone through a faith transition, I want to compile a few resources for you that you can have as you parent your kids. Now, some of these resources are more broad-based, like parenting general, and some are more narrow as far as really truly teaching kids specific things, specific values, specific skills, because you kind of need it all, right? You need both. And these are not age specific, because I know, you teach 2-year-olds very different than you teach 12-year-olds. So these are more general and applicable to all ages. So first one is actually applicable to just a little bit older girls, let's say starting at 10 through 15. And these are the American Girl doll books, because they are amazing. Now, I'm not talking about the novels, about the characters. I'm talking about specific series. There's the Care and Keeping of You series. Excellent, especially for girls and the changing body and puberty and all of that. There's the Smart Girls Guide series. Really good stuff there. There's the Feeling book. Going back to the Smart Girls Guide series that talks about family, relationships with friends, dealing with changes, all of these things that are so valuable. You can take those books and you can mine them for resources and for teaching ideas and for all sorts of things. And while they are geared obviously towards girls, the information in there can be used for any gender, most of the information in there. So they're excellent. Use them for sound idea principles. Okay, second, this is more of a generic parenting book, and it's really any book by Dr. Shefali Sabari. She does a parenting book that maybe you've heard of called The Conscious Parent. Good stuff, right? It's just a good, solid parenting book. And it's about a whole approach to parenting. I feel it really honors the child, which frankly isn't always our approach when it comes to parenting. So when a child feels honored and seen, this is important, because then they're so much more likely to be open to our influence and our teachings, right? Okay, next, and this is another generic in that it's a broad range parenting book, and it's called No Drama Discipline, the Whole Brain Way to Calm the Chaos and Nurture Your Child's Developing Mind. And they talk about all sorts of ages here, so they definitely address super young kids and all of the ages and stages of child development. This is by Daniel Siegel, Siegel, and Tina Payne Bryson, Bryson. Now, this book was recommended to me years ago by our daughter's therapist, and it was excellent, full of really good practical advice, full of really good information on child development and all of that, so you can just understand the context of what it means to be a child and to have a child, right? This is a great book because it talks about, it's a great basic primer for parenting. And even if you think I've got parenting down, I would highly recommend it, because it's such a back to the basics, but in a refined way, in that it's not the parenting books you read 10 years ago. It's 10 times better than that. Okay. All right, the next few are more specific to teaching kids, like specific things you can teach your kids, as opposed to specific things you can read so you can be a better parent. And one is the Life Coach School podcast by Brooke Castillo. It's full of so many great topics and ideas. She has they're not usually super long, maybe 20 to 30 minutes, and you can listen to one and really have something solid you can then create into your own lesson plan for your kids. Gold mine of resources to teach children. While she is teaching adults, I have taken many of her concepts and adapted them very successfully to my own kids. She covers topics like how to feel better, how to set goals, how to love, how to set boundaries, why change is hard, accepting pain, emotional processing, and on and on. Really valuable stuff. Karen has a book called Mindset that I think is really important to understand the difference between fixed and growth mindset. Those are the two approaches that she talks about in her book. She's brilliant. She talks about how to teach our kids to have a growth mindset, right? That's the idea. A growth mindset is all about being willing to keep trying, being willing to show up, how to handle hard things, a lot of really good practical things in there on teaching your kids the values around a growth mindset. Another suggestion is hire a coach or a therapist. This one is good. I mean, I've done it all. We've had therapists, I hire coaches for me, for my children because we need support, right? We need help figuring out our emotional lives, our mental lives. Like, we need a little bit of help. We don't need to throw our kids into the deep end of life. We can give them some support and structure. And there they are, home. And the last one, which I left for last because I think it's the most important, and that's your own imagination and your own example, right? You are your most valuable resource. You know your kids best. You know what engages them and doesn't engage them. You know what lessons they struggle with and what ones they get. We often underestimate our own gifts and our own knowing regarding our kids because sometimes we're afraid of missing something or doing something wrong. But what if you could just set that fear aside and just lean into love and do what you can for your kids and guide your kids in the best way you know how? I guarantee you will do amazing. Also, your own modeling of living a life based on values and goodness is more powerful than any lesson plan or any talk or any lecture you could ever give your children. What you do is louder than what you say is 100% true. So do not underestimate like fancy lesson plans and great ideas and cool concepts. Do not put that at a higher value than you just living a really decent, good life and showing that to your kids. They will learn more about values and character and being like a wholehearted person in this world than any lesson plan can ever teach them. All right, so those are some of my basic principles. If you really struggle with parenting, especially in the context of a mixed faith marriage, reach out to me and let's talk. Just go to my website, or you can message me here on Facebook. Go to brookeboothcoaching.com and you'll be able to see a really quick and easy way to contact me and set up a free call. It's free. I know. We can talk about what's going on in your mixed faith marriage, your parenting, as it's impacted by that. And we can see if coaching's a really good fit for you to help you become a better parent, a better spouse, and really show up as somebody powerful, impactful, and influential with your children. All right, wishing you the best.